Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jenna Quinn, and it's my pleasure as the Assistant Director of Alumni and Affinity Engagement to welcome you to this edition of the 49er Industry Chat. Before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping to let everyone know this is being recorded, so you'll be able to access this on demand at our website at www.csulb.edu/alumni. And you'll be able to watch it again or share it with a friend or a colleague or anyone you think might be able to get something out of this. But with that, it's also my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Lance Santiago. Hi, Lance.
Hello, how's everybody doing? Glad to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Well, just to share a little bit about Lance for everybody out there, Lance served in the United States Marine Corps from 2011 to 2015 as an embarkation and logistics specialist. He was deployed overseas to Afghanistan and Romania in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. After his enlistment, Lance earned his Bachelor of Science in Business Administration with a double concentration in Operation and Supply Chain Management and Business Management from Cal State University, Long Beach. Lance currently serves as a material management within Northrop Grumman's space sector. When he's not working, Lance enjoys running, climbing, or hiking, and has participated in half marathons, and triathlons. Lance continues to volunteer as a mentor for college students and currently serves as a COB SCPD Advisory Board member and a COB Supply Chain Advisory Board member. Wow, that is quite a lot there in your bio, Lance. I'm very impressed, and thank you so much for taking the time today.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to be here as well.
Oh, our pleasure, our pleasure. Well, with that, let's just launch right into it. Let's start off with a little bit of background. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your experiences before CSULB that led you to CSULB? I know that you had a whole career before CSULB, so let's hear a little bit about your journey to CSULB.
Yeah, certainly. I think my journey really begins with being a first generation college student. And when I graduated from high school, I really wasn't all too certain of what career or what path I wanted to follow. Somewhere along the way, I ran into a Marine Corps recruiter, and they presented me with the opportunities of being able to develop myself, gain leadership skills, as well as being able to fund my educational pursuits after my enlistment. And one of the jobs, or MOSs, as we call them, that attracted me was logistics, because it was very much fast-paced, it was complex, and at the same time, you had a high level of responsibility, depending on what the mission was. So that's really what got me started and interested in listening into the Marine Corps right after high school. I served 4 years, did various roles, some that I didn't like, some that I enjoyed very much. But nevertheless, after my 4 years was finished, I decided to finally start those educational pursuits that I set out for myself. And that's actually what led me to starting at Santa Monica College, a community college. After my 2 years, I obtained my associates. And as I was debating what field or what major I wanted to pursue, I thought to myself, like, you know what? I have logistical experience. Why not try to pair that up with formal education? I was fairly successful at what I did during my time in the Marine Corps, and I enjoyed it, and I found a lot of value, as well as it being rewarding. So why not make a career out of it? And as I was looking, doing my own individual research, I found that Long Beach actually had a supply chain program. And I applied, and fortunately enough, I was accepted. and I transferred over to CUC Long Beach to start my bachelor's degree. After 2 years, I graduated, and I was very fortunate as well to obtain an internship with Northrop Grumman during my junior year. And that's eventually what led me to a full-time role starting in early 2020 after I graduated.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so much there that I just kind of want to dive into and unpack. But let's start with the internship that you had
Mhm.
with Northrop Grumman, that eventually ended up into to landing the full-time job. Um, you know, how did you go about finding that internship? Was it your first choice? Did you apply to many? And then how was the internship? What did you learn?
No, definitely. So I'll be very candid. I did not know about Northrop Grumman until I actually met a good friend and now and mentor through the corporate mentoring program that's conducted and hosted by the Student Center for Professional Development. Um, and after meeting with him and getting to know a little bit about what his role was and the organization, I was like, wow, this company just sounds amazing. Um, and at the same time found out that they also hosted internship opportunities, and I was like, you know what, this company really aligns with my own personal values as well as my own personal mission of still supporting our national defense and our own security as well as those of our allies, being prior service. And so I said, hey, why the heck not? I applied, and I was very fortunate in being able to obtain an interview, and from there, I was able to land the internship for a um, administrative supply chain position out of Palmdale, out of their Palmdale facility. The internship was about 12 weeks long, and there I also got the unique experience of one being able to attend, high level functional meetings, organizational policy making, as well as strategy making, um, in terms of how do we develop the correct processes for um, our employees or our own organization to really become a lot more efficient and effective with how they manage their supply chain. And then after doing that, I then fully transitioned into a full-time opportunity, starting at the El Segundo location here in here in California.
Awesome. And what about your student experience when you were here at CSULB? You were a transfer student. You were a student who had a career previously, right? So you weren't fresh out of high school. What was that like, and how did you navigate it?
I found it a little bit challenging at first because it took a little while for me to adjust from being in the Marine Corps to then being a student. There was certainly a bit of a cultural difference. I was very much in my shell, so to speak. So after I actually didn't start getting involved with student organizations until I transferred to CUC Long Beach. Back when I was attending Santa Monica College, it was very much a day-to-day routine of, okay, I'm just going to attend class and then I'm going to go back home and then come back for class, back and forth. After running into a student organization called the Society for Advancement of Management, there I really found individuals as well as a culture and organization that, gave a lot more than just, the day-to-day routine of attending your class and then going home. I found a lot of, high what's the word, like very high performing exceptional individuals as a member of SAM. And I was like, you know what, this organization really gives out a lot to its members, develops them, gives them insight into the industry as well as what they can expect, as well as presenting opportunities for students to network other professionals or even just meet different companies and become a lot more aware. So that's really what captivated my interest and allowed me to even just to remain there. And so that's really where I kind of like started becoming a lot more involved with the actual the student experience of student organizations and other college led programs. And I found that to be extremely rewarding and value added for my career as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, were there any other student orgs that you were a part of and, that had any impact on your career?
Oh, there's quite a few. It's not necessarily a student organization, but it's called the Corporate Mentoring Program, as well as like being involved with the community scholars, all of these separate programs falling under the Student Center for Professional Development. There, through the Corporate Mentoring Program, I actually was able to be paired up with a professional mentor who was actually an engineering manager out of Boeing. Um, and so at that time, being able to get a lot of his own personal insight into how to develop your career, how to polish your resume, how to apply for an internship, or how to, even answer the questions in an interview, through the behavioral response or STAR format, and really giving me a lot of leverage and lessons for how to propel my career at a very early start. So that insight, that experience that he, selflessly shared with me was incredibly valuable for me, especially with me not having, let's say, someone who in my family who did graduate from college, being a first generation college student, I didn't have anybody to look to, or being able to field my questions that I had, or even providing me with some form of, actual real world experience. So that kind of partnership, that kind of mentorship, and those kind of organizations or programs have just been immensely beneficial for me and my student experience, as well as my development as a student.
Well, that's awesome. I love that you're able to, jump right into the beach and utilize everything that the beach had to offer and really parlay that into career success.
Mhm.
Which, speaking of which, you went out and started your permanent full-time position with Northrop at a really interesting time. Early 2020, right? So
Right.
what was that like? And what was that transition like? And what was number one, what was it like getting hired on from an internship to a full-time position? And then with early 2020 being when you started, how did
Mhm.
you deal?
I think the transition from a intern to a full-time employee was actually relatively smooth, because being an intern, you really get already like an exposure of what the day-to-day, or what kind of like the culture feels like. So being transitioning into a full-time, I felt very familiar. I felt very comfortable. And the only thing that really changed was, okay, now my job responsibilities changed, or those who I work with changed. But overall, it was still very much a very similar feel. Now, with it being early 2020 and the pandemic starting around the same time, actually, I think it started, at least for me, about a month or so after I started my full-time position. And that change was more so of, okay, instead of working on site, now we're working remote. So it was a little bit impactful in terms of working, with my teams on a day-to-day basis, very much face to face, or being able to really kind of increase my own exposure and development. And a lot of it had to be through like online training, and, and still being able to, I guess, develop those skills that you would still need if you were to, be actually in the office. But I would say the organization did a very, very great transition from working from on-site to remote. They gave me all the tools that I needed to succeed. And then when we finally started going back to in person and on-site, that transition also felt very seamless too.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad that you're able to navigate that well. Um, but I think that a lot of folks do, they're always curious, what does a typical day look like in your position? With that, is there a typical day? And if somebody were looking to step into what you're doing, what would you tell them is what you're doing?
No, definitely. I think a typical day really involves revising your material strategy, assessing your resources as well as prioritizing your own requirements and essentially, what's needed first in order to build XYZ product. So some of the actions that I do is I participate in whether we make or buy set components. I engage in long-term planning. That's planning, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from said date. I do my best to lead initiatives for affordability, cost savings, as well as process improvements. And some of the smaller daily tasks can simply just involve, analyzing your material supply demand positions. Hey, you're ordering XYZ amount of material. Do you really need it all? Or, hey, these new requirements are coming down the line. How can we best prepare ourselves, knowing the information that we know now, to ensure that when that material is getting ready to be installed or used, it's there, available, as well as built to the actual, technical specifications that we need the material to be built to, or the parts. Additionally, I monitor our inventory levels, and I collaborate very extensively with various teams, cross-functional organizations, to ensure that our supply chain is running smoothly and that the program has the tools and equipment or information they need to succeed.
That sounds like a lot.
Mm.
And it sounds like it's pretty dynamic work that would involve a whole lot of people.
It definitely does. Yes, because while you have one small portion of the process, it's huge, very large and wide organization. And parts, they can be touched by single part can be touched by several dozens or even up to 100 people. You got your suppliers, you have your transportation and your logistics. Once it arrives to your warehouse, you have that team touching that material, moving it from where it needs to be. From there, you have an additional team who moves it from the warehouse to the operations floor, and then you have your engineers who are taking that part and then reviewing it, analyzing it, installing it into whatever product they may be building at the time. And if additional issues or constraints come up, then you start involving your quality, your process improvement personnel, and at the same time you're still evaluating other functions. You have your advanced planners, your material requirement planners, all who really are more on the upfront side of things, and not necessarily touching the part per se, but they are very much involved in that step-to-step process.
That's great. So in your particular position, in your line of work, how would you say, work-life balance operates? How do you manage it? Is it something that, you're able to close your computer at a certain time, or is it something that, really just demands your attention often?
I've been very fortunate in terms that I would say my work-life balance is fairly good. I do have a set schedule or core hours, as we call them. For example, I may need to be available between 9 to 3, but whether I log in at 8:30 or arrive at the office at 8:30 or at 6:30, and so long as I'm available during those core hours, that's what is needed for the program, to ensure they have the correct support that they need. But once that time ends and I log out for the day or I leave the office for the day, it's very rare for me to return or have to log back in, to address any issues, unless they are of a priority, of course. But that's mostly up to you to determine, hey, at this time, this really needs to be dealt with in an urgent and a timely manner. So you also have to have your own, I guess, in a way, judgment of how you are going to perform your statement work.
What would you say is the most challenging part of your job?
I think the most challenging part for myself is navigating just through the complexity of supply chain, especially dealing with non-standard parts or or with critical path procurement. So what I mean by non-standard parts is that some of these components, they're one of a kind. You often will find suppliers who may not deal or have had any experience building set components, or for the suppliers that have maybe some experience, the amount of those suppliers are very limited, maybe 1, 2, 3 suppliers, if you're lucky, that have specialized in, those said components. And then with a critical path procurement, well then, okay, so you have a highly complex piece of material that has to go through several hundred hours of qualification before it can even be installed or used. But hey, you're also facing maybe a budget or a schedule constraint. Then how do you balance the two? If your component still has to be reliable to perform said mission, but you need it, in XYZ amount of time, and how are you able to balance and navigate through those challenges? So that complexity is certainly there, but at the same time is also very much makes the job interesting.
Yeah. Makes it so not every single day is exactly the same.
Every challenge seems to be very different, even just by one small step or a mile.
Yeah. Well, then on the opposite side of that coin, what's the most rewarding part of your job?
On the flip side, I would say the most rewarding part is implementing successful cost savings or process improvement strategies, because it then just contributes the overall efficiency and success of the supply chain. So let's say, for example, you have different inventory locations, different warehouses, and maybe you're running into a situation where you don't necessarily see all the inventory located in each warehouse. Well, then how can you really get an overview glimpse of what your actual inventory levels are? You work on establishing that process with different teammates, and then you work on implementing it, testing it, and whatnot. And then you start seeing like, hey, well, at one point, our schedule said we needed XYZ component. Well, turns out for XYZ location, well, turns out we have this part in another location. Then that just kind of helps you resolve those challenges of, hey, especially when last minute constraints come up. It's like, okay, we're actually covered. We don't have to go and pressure our suppliers or try to coordinate, 3 different pathways to bring said material in. Now we actually just go over there, pick it up, transfer it on over, problem solved.
Are you someone who likes puzzles? It feels like materials management, supply chain management is almost like a puzzle.
Honestly, I've just in the past I've described it as a Rubik's cube that you're trying to solve, but it also fights you at the same time. It fights back. It tries to not get solved. So it's always continuing, and it's very much definitely puzzle oriented. So if you enjoy problems that are dynamic, ever changing, and not necessarily are a one-stop solution, then I definitely would encourage anybody to look into supply chain.
No, I like the visual of a Rubik's Cube who fights back. That's a fun thing to think about. But how would you say how important is mentorship in this field, right? Like in supply chain management, is it something that's really important? Has it been really impactful when you look around at everyone else? And then specifically for you, who have your mentors been? Have you mentored anybody? And is it something that folks in this field should become acquainted with?
Most certainly, I think mentors are invaluable, regardless of whether you're in the supply chain field, in finance, or any other field, because having a mentor provides you with a strategic outlook of what your career may be in the future, and really helps you make those decisions, upfront decisions now, to take you from the present to the future and how to best navigate through those challenges. So not only from a career perspective is a mentor invaluable, but also even from your day-to-day, let's say for me personally, in a more supply chain focused role. I can look at our more seasoned team members or teammates, get their guidance and how they would approach problems, and really be able to implement that into my own solutions to then further leverage my own success. So I think just having a mentor point blank offers a valuable insight based on their own experience. And from what I've noticed, a lot of people simply just want to share and give back. And how I was able to find my own mentor. I mean, again, through the corporate mentoring program, but their experience that they shared, even if it just may seem something as simple as how to update your resume or how to apply for an internship, really gave me the insights and wisdom that I needed at that time. Because not everybody may know how to best, calibrate their resume. So, having those pointers or those tips really do make a difference.
I think a lot of folks, kind of um, get maybe intimidated is the right word by the
Hmm.
idea of mentorship. Like it's a really huge thing. Is there anything that any like tips or tricks or anything or just experiences that you've had with mentorship that kind of demystifies that, or any particular stories that were like, oh, was awesome.
Um, so I think, like I mentioned before, a lot of people are just willing to give back. So let's say I found somebody that you heard from one of their COCOB alumni chats or talks, and you really enjoyed hearing the presentation, really enjoyed hearing what they had to say. I'm sure they'd be more than willing for you to just contact them, maybe via LinkedIn, and just tell them, hey, I heard about XYZ industry chat. I really resonated with XYZ talking points. I was hoping maybe you could be able to share, 30 minutes of your time with me for an informational interview. And that's how you're able to start those early conversations. And then from then on, you can then even pose the question, you know what, I'm hoping we maybe be able to host our chats, on a monthly basis, on a bi-monthly basis for half an hour, 45 minutes. And I definitely wanted to say I'm very optimistic that they would say yes, given their assuming they have available schedule and whatnot. But definitely optimistic, and at least for myself, when I have my own mentees, I do my best to just give as much information as I can as freely as possible, and at the same time not hinder any form of guidance. You definitely also want to give them the good, but also maybe a little bit of the bad. The bad lessons that you've learned through your own experience, so that way they're able to make their own decisions and gain a lot, not just from their own personal experience, but yours too.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think that um I'd love to hear more about, the SCPD Advisory Board and the Supply Chain Management Advisory Board. What, what is your roles? I mean, I love that you're still so involved with the beach. But what does that really look like? Can you tell me a little bit about those and, um, maybe how students can possibly benefit from that?
Oh yes, most certainly. So I think so. Very simply, both organizations fall under the College of Business. What they're focused on is bringing in industry experience, and then using that experience to create or push for programs or events or developments within the college's own curriculum or within the college's own programs to better align them with the industry. So, for example, for the Supply Chain Advisory Board, me being a member there, most recently the organization actually implemented a supply chain networking mixer for students to be able to network with supply chain professionals as well as gain some industry knowledge. And especially at a time when maybe we didn't have a lot of students engaging or with the college or being involved, especially after going through the pandemic. So it's these kind of adjustments, these kind of initiatives that the advisory boards may incorporate or establish really for the benefit of the student, as well as their development, and for presenting opportunities that will benefit or will be of benefit to them and their career.
So one of the things that seems to be like a buzzword across all industries, and to seem to have an impact across all industries, is AI, artificial intelligence. How how have you seen AI playing out in
Mhm.
your industry? And, is it a good thing, a bad thing? Is it worrisome, or is it something to be celebrated?
Oh, definitely. That's a very good question. I believe that AI plays a very significant role in my field. It's a Personally, I believe it's a positive force, aiding in automating labor-intensive tasks or repetitive tasks, enhancing your demand forecast through predictive analysis based on past performance, and overall, really optimizing your own processes. The integration of artificial intelligence has increased our own efficiency as well as our own decision making. Whereas, for example, there's I can't remember the organization's name or the company's name right now, but they're trying to figure out how to use analytics, robots, and sensors to make mining a lot more safer. Whereas you don't need a lot of human intervention, and then taking all those resources for mining to maybe local ships, using tracking RFIDs, and really then it becomes a lot more of a streamlined operation. Um, but at the same time, I would say the caveat with having artificial intelligence is that I would say it's also going to require a lot of upskilling for our current workforce. Being able to understand concepts such as blockchain. How do you create good data visualization? How do you extract your data, understanding the information or the tools that will come with artificial intelligence in order to make a better decision, not necessarily just for your own personal role and your day-to-day actions, but for the overall organization as well. So there's certainly going to be some challenges with incorporating AI, and it's going to require some additional skills and experience that employees will need to go out there and obtain.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up upskilling. I think that that's another thing that's really important in many different industries. Um, how for you and in your experience, um, how do you deal with this idea of upskilling and continuing education? Is continuing education something that's really important in supply chain management, and where do you find yours, if so?
Mhm. No, definitely. I think continuing your own education and your own self-development is going to be very important, regardless of whichever field you may pursue. And it's funny you actually bring that up because I'm actually starting to study for my GMAT, so then I can later on apply to MBA programs. And so I'm working on that own upskilling right there too. But there's also a lot of certifications that a lot of industries offer that are very tailored to their specific sector or area of expertise. So, for example, we have the supply chain certificate for professionals, for certified professionals. And then we also have there's also a lot of data visualization certifications offered like via Google or Tableau. And that gives you very much a lot of additional foundation with understanding your own data and see how you're able to better manage it too. So definitely, upskilling is very, very important.
Yeah. So the GMAT that you're working on, to get, to be able to go get your MBA, um, I think that that's so interesting in that, you know, where where do you see yourself going, right? If you want to get that MBA and you want to make that next leap, um, where's the leap to? What do you see in your future, the next thing down the road? Is this a supply chain something that you're thinking about sticking with, for sure? Um, and uh, where else might these types of skills that you learned, both in the military and at CSULB, where else might those serve?
Mhm. Most definitely. I think for me personally, I would have to be in a field in which I see or believe that what I do is making a positive impact upon society. So
Mm.
that's areas of space, aerospace. We have other areas of healthcare or renewable energy. I definitely would love to take my skills to any of those sectors. Additionally, I definitely would still seek to continue to develop myself in order to transition from an individual contributor to then you're maybe into a formal leadership positions. Now you're developing, teams and developing their skill set, and at the same time having a higher stake or higher level of responsibility, managing entire programs or certain sections or packages of a program, but still very much concentrated on overall supply chain success.
Yeah. Well, I think that that was, you know, just vague enough to be very hopeful that you do in fact have a lot more in your future, but not too specific as to give anyone any hints as to where you're going. But yeah, no, I love that this career track really works out for you, and that this is going so well. But as far as is there anything else in your personal life that maybe contributes to your career success? I know you run marathons and triathlons. But yeah, what in your personal life really sets you up for that career success?
Um, I think what sets me up a lot for my own career success is a lot of the skills that I actually learned in the Marine Corps, skills focused on initiative, self-development, really not being afraid to, take lead or being uh, responsible for certain items. And oftentimes, I see people shy away from having a leadership role or from incorporating additional responsibility. Maybe it's not necessarily shyness, but I definitely would ensure or like to encourage people into really moving into those kind of key positions and taking on additional assignments, maybe assignments that not a lot of people are willing to take because they may be a stretch or cause a little bit more stress. And but those kind of key initiatives and implementations or additional assignments that you may take might may end up benefiting you, in the long term, and really position yourself as a key team member for the organization. If they see you take an additional assignment, additional responsibilities out of your day-to-day scope, it's like, okay, so and so has been doing an amazing job. Why not? Let's bring them up to the next higher level. And that's how you're able to also not only stand out within your career, but also within among your teammates too.
It's great. So if you were, if someone came to you, either a senior at CSULB or someone who had just recently graduated, what advice might you give to someone who, is coming out with that supply chain management degree and doesn't really know what's that next step or where they should go or
Mhm.
where they, where should they be going?
No, that's a very good question. I think the upside and the very great thing about being in supply chain is it's so diverse. It's incredibly diverse. We're always going to need a supply chain. Every organization, every company has some form of supply chain, whether they're actually touching physical goods or not, being directly involved with the physical goods. For example, I mean, you have Costco, they have a supply chain. Long Beach, they have a supply chain too. How are they supposed to get their materials and their supplies that they need? And you have the Port of Long Beach, that's a huge Long Beach hub, and additional organizations such as healthcare too. They also have a supply chain. They have a lot of supplies and equipment that they need in order to be able to run their hospital effectively, as well as provide that quality healthcare for their patients. So that's the very beneficial side of supply chain, that it's very much diverse and it prevents a lot of opportunity for students to explore as well as pursue areas in which are able to kind of like align better with their values or with their interest. And for students that enter the field, I definitely recommend developing a strong analytical and forecasting skills. How do you extrapolate your data? How do you manage it? And then more importantly, how do you present it to other stakeholders in order to make a better decision for your program? The ability to adapt to evolving technologies, AI, blockchain, and automation is going to be incredibly crucial. And then additionally, just seek mentorships and wherever you can, stay up to date as best as you can on the industry trends, and don't shy away from the upcoming changes. I definitely would encourage you to embrace the future changes in supply chain.
And where do you, or where would one go to keep up on industry trends? Is there any kind of professional network or organization that helps you with that? Or is that something that you just kind of pick up from, networking and reaching out to other folks?
Oh, that's very very great question. Sorry. Being involved with student organizations is the starter. The Student for Advancement of Management, SAM, within the College of Business. They focus on supply chain, networking with different supply chain organizations, as well as a heavy amount of their membership base is also focused in supply chain. When becoming a professional, at least personally for me, I like to view a lot of news articles from the Harvard Business Review, and then gain additional insight through there's other networking opportunities through, I think it's called the um, CSMP, the Corporate Supply Chain Management Professionals Program. Don't quote me on that one, but there's definitely dedicated organizations focus in supply chain innovation, staying with up to date with news, as well as sharing the leading industry developments within our sector.
Great. Yeah. All right. Well, I can't believe it. It always goes by so quickly for me. I don't know about you. But as we are wrapping up this awesome edition of the 49 Industry Chat series, there's one question that I just love to ask everyone, which is, if you had a time machine or magic wand or some way to be able to go back to yourself back when you were first graduating from CSULB or about to graduate, what one piece of advice would you give yourself?
Oh, great question. My one piece of advice that I would give myself is closed mouths don't get fed. And by closed mouths not getting fed, what I mean is that you really have to advocate for oneself, speaking up, whether it's related to your own personal goals or to your own career. I'll keep it to the career portion side of things, but if you feel that you aren't being challenged enough, if you feel that you can incorporate higher level of responsibility within your role, if you feel that you are ready for the next promotion, for that next step, or even for a stretch assignment, speak up. Really do share your intentions. Don't be afraid to vocalize your ambitions with your manager. And if you have a good manager, which I hope you do, they'll do their best to support you on that transition, as well as develop a game plan for you to actualize those goals. So speaking up, advocating for oneself is going to be incredibly important, certainly on a personal level, but also for your career as well. So please, please speak up.
Speak up for yourself. You're your own best advocate, right?
Yes, most certainly. Mhm.
Awesome. Well, Lance, thank you so much for taking the time today. I think this has been an incredibly informative chat. So I can't thank you enough. And also want to say a big thank you to everyone who joined us today. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day, and we hope that you did get something great out of this. Again, this is being recorded, so this will be up in our video library that you can find at www.csulb.edu/alumni. And then I also want to encourage you guys to follow us on social media, and to make sure that you don't miss the next chat or the next program that we're doing. So want to encourage you to do that. But Lance, if folks had additional questions or wanted to continue the conversation with you, how might they best get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch with me is via LinkedIn. You can just search me up, Lance Osorio Santiago. By all means, feel free to send me a connection request or even a quick message. I'd be more than happy to, sit with anybody for, half an hour virtually in person to share my own experience, provide some additional insight or whatnot. But yeah, LinkedIn is the best way, and I'm always available.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And you heard it, guys. Take them up on it. I'm sure you will get some more great things out of it. So thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.